Good afternoon, everybody. I realize that we're still kind of figuring out the YouTube thing, but we're going to get started with the jam session today and roll through. So for those of you that are watching live, we're going to take a little bit of time today and just kind of figure out how the jam sessions via YouTube Hangouts are actually going to work. And then also I want to go through and talk about some of the features in Plus This and go through some of the stuff that way. So.
Good afternoon, everybody. I realize
something has just happened, and hang on a sec. I got to figure out why this is going on.
We're going to get started with the jam session today.
Oh, there it is.
And roll through.
So that was me listening to myself. I have it open a bunch of different places because I want to make sure that this actually works. In fact, I should have it. For some reason, it's not playing on this page. It should be. Oh, here we go. But I also have it on my tablet here, so I just want to make sure that I know what you guys are going through when you're watching this. So. Anyway, welcome today to the jam session. I want to welcome everybody to the jam session, and we'll get started here pretty quick. A couple of housekeeping items before I flip to the PowerPoint. If you are on the help.plusthis.com site and watching the video replay there, click on the Watch in YouTube button, and it'll take you to the YouTube page. If you want to ask questions, for now, until I figure out how the question thing actually works, you're going to want to click on, you're going to go to YouTube and then just put comments in. So if you comment on the video, that's going to show up on my screen here, and I'm going to be able to answer questions that way. Now, I will tell you, there is a bit of a delay on the questions getting sent to me, so type them in early, and then when they get to me, I can answer them here. I've got them right here on the side. So any questions you have will show up here, and we can go through that. I want to flip over now, and let's go through and talk about what we're going to do today on our jam session. So let me share my screen here, and we'll be ready to go. So today, welcome again today. The jam session today is going to be brought to you by Google Hangouts on Air or YouTube Events on Air, live events, whatever you want to call it, hopefully. In case you are not aware, or if you are aware, and just as a reminder, you are able to tweet questions to me at Brentwood James. If you have questions during the week, you also feel free to go to help.plusthis.com and submit support tickets. You can also send emails to help@plusthis.com. Okay. Now, I just want to take a little bit. Some of you have seen this little intro that I did on the first jam session that we did, but I just want to introduce myself a little bit more to everybody in case you don't know anything about me. First of all, my name is Brett Martineau, and in that picture, in case you're curious or you don't quite know, or in case the video that you just watched wasn't an indication, I'm the guy on the right in the picture, not the girl in the middle with the peace sign. That's my wife, and that's us in Seattle. Last summer we went up there, or it wasn't summer actually, last November, October, something like that. Went up there and had some amazing food, and it was good times. I worked at Infusionsoft back in the early days. Not many of you had even heard of Infusionsoft when I worked there way back, and I was like the 7th employee at Infusionsoft, worked there in support. Broke off and worked as an ICC for several years, and then got sort of drafted into work for 6th Division for a couple of years. And Plus This came because of 6th Division, because of the stuff that we were doing for Infusionsoft customers. And so I was able to be part of that from the beginning, and then I've recently been moved from the 6th Division side to full-time on the Plus This side. And so that's what I spend my time doing. So I'm on the other end of all the support tickets. I do all the training and all that kind of stuff. And so if anything ever comes up, you'll be hearing a lot from me and communicating a lot with me. So let's flip over and talk about what we're actually going to talk about today, which is first of all the Google Hangouts. So just to repeat for anybody who is late to the webinar, or well, late by 4 minutes, so I guess you're not really that late. For a couple of things, first of all, there's always going to be a little bit of a delay between what you're saying and what I'm saying. So I'm saying it now, but it's by the time you hear me say that, it's like 2 or 3. Well, I don't actually know how long it is. I think it's like 30 seconds will have passed. But just know that that's the case. And if you have questions that you're going to be typing in, just know you need to get them in quick because they're not going to show up to me until a little bit later. So keep that in mind as we go through that way. We're going to keep rolling with Google Hangouts on Air. The YouTube thing, I think that it's going to work out pretty well for us once we kind of get over some of the initial humps. I'm going to try and figure out how to get it to work where we can actually have it more like a Hangout where you're actually asking questions directly to me. I don't know exactly how I did it wrong because the first time I tested it, it worked that way. But we'll figure out how to make that work a little bit later. So just keep that in mind, and as we go, we'll make that happen. If you have never been to one of my jam sessions before, then you may not be aware, but I speak Russian. I spent some time in Eastern Europe and in Ukraine and in Russia. So first of all, I'm particularly close to the stuff that's happening in Ukraine right now, but also I majored in Russian in college, and as you can probably guess, don't get to use it very much. So on the jam sessions, I like to just teach a little bit of Russian now and again, some different words. So I've recently gotten really into the show, the USA show Suits. It's a lawyer show, and so it's fitting that the word of the day today would be lawyer. So the Russian pronunciation is advokat, and it means lawyer. Advokat obviously comes from the same root as advocate or advocate, which is kind of a word that we kind of use in English to mean the same thing. But yeah, that's kind of how it works. Advokat is how it's pronounced. So a little bit of housekeeping. You may have noticed, I think I talked about it a little bit last week, but I want to mention it again. We've done some rearranging inside Plus This. There's some things that are named differently. There's some different menu stuff. So I'm going to go through and indicate some of that stuff. But if you have questions about anything, just let me know. Not much of the functionality has changed. We've just moved things. So don't worry about too much of that. It's just a matter of moving things around. So okay, today on the jam session, we're going to talk about the GoToWebinar integration feature as well as the YouTube playlist tracking. We talked a little bit about playlist tracking last week, but I want to talk a little bit more and talk about the differences between the regular regular video tracking and the playlist tracking, so we can see what some of the differences are there and why they are as they are. So let's flip back to my webcam here. Oh, I don't know what just happened. I decided it wanted to go crazy there for a second. And let's flip now to my my screen so I can show you. Where is my? Here it is. And here we are. Okay. So we're going to go through now and just talk about those different features inside of Plus This. So first thing that I want to show you is the new interface. So let me just log in here real quick, and then we can walk through where things are, the changes that have been made, that kind of thing. So if you go to the feature library, you'll notice not really much of the interface itself has changed, right? It's all the same type of thing. We've just changed where the different features are located and how you interact with them. And so we've got the GoToWebinar integration at the top, Smart Links, which is the new name for customized thank you pages. We've renamed customized thank you pages to Smart Links, so you'll notice inside they're called Smart Links, and everything is revolving around that idea. And then split testing and video tracking, and then we have this in the SMS messaging, and then we have this implementers toolkit, which is basically a combination of all these other features. They kind of don't stand alone too well, but they do kind of add up to some of these things that we can do that help us with it inside Infusionsoft. So I wanted to talk about a couple of these features in particular, like I mentioned before. The first is the integration, and the second is going to be this YouTube playlist. So let's go first to the integration, the GoToWebinar integration, and talk just for a second about some of the pieces here. Okay, and I want to not talk so much about how to use it as much as give you more in-depth information on the concept behind it, and so you understand how it works. So first thing that's going to happen is once we've connected our GoToWebinar account to our Plus This account, it's going to go and query GoToWebinar and pull up all the different webinars that we have scheduled in GoToWebinar. Now I have scheduled in here, I have the Plus This jam session, which we're not actually using in GoToWebinar anymore, and then I'm doing a webinar on Monday, a sales webinar to help get some more people into Plus This. And so that pulls these things back. Now, if you'll notice over here, there's this note here. If you add a webinar to GoToWebinar, it could take as long as 15 minutes for it to show up in this dropdown. In fact, that's the case with just about anything when you're talking back and forth between any of our stuff and GoToWebinar. It could take as long as 15 minutes for that information to be passed back and forth, just because the way that it's set up, GoToWebinar's API doesn't push things as quickly across as we would like. So first thing we're going to do is just pick a webinar, so we'll say the jam session, And now there are 3 different sections here of the different types of things that we can do with the GoToWebinar connection. And we've never really talked about it this way, but I wanted to sort of split it out so you would understand. The first is we can auto-register people for the webinar, okay? And that you can do, you don't actually have to set anything up in order to do that. You don't have to store any of the information. You can just select the webinar and then click Create, right? So it's kind of like what Automation Core does. All you have to do is say, just select the webinar and then hit select, and then this HTTP post will register people for the webinar. So you can auto-register them all you want, and then just have the stuff come out of GoToWebinar, and everything's fine. You don't have to worry about anything else. Okay. But if you want to do anything else, then there's those other 2 sections that I want to talk about now. So the first is just auto-register, which you can do, like I said, without setting up any of the other options. This next section is where if we want to actually send our reminders out of Infusionsoft and not out of GoToWebinar. Some people like the GoToWebinar reminders that get sent out, and some people don't. I personally am not a huge fan, but it's not like the end of the world if you use those. So I like to pull back the webinar link, if I can, into Infusionsoft so that I can send that out of Infusionsoft instead of having to send it out of GoToWebinar. And so I pull the join link back into a field. Okay, so for example, webinar join link. Okay, now the webinar title and the start date and time, a couple of things you need to know. First of all, the title is going to come back, that's pretty straightforward. It's just text, it's going to come back into a field and display the title. You can merge into emails, right? So that's mostly if you're running multiple webinars and you need the current webinar, the one that they registered for, to be in that field. Webinar start date and time is going to be a little bit awkward because this thing comes back as, if it comes back as a date time field, the time is going to be in American Eastern Standard Time. Well, or American Eastern Time, I guess it's not always Standard Time. But it'll always be in American Eastern Time because that's the time zone that Infusionsoft runs all of its calculations off of. Now I understand that we can't really actually tie into the time section of what we do out of Infusionsoft, but because of the way that Infusionsoft handles their time and the fact that everything comes out of the Eastern time zone, we convert all the dates into American Eastern. So that means if you are in the UK, or if you're in Australia, or if you're on the west coast of the US, or anywhere else, if you pull that date and time back into a date time field, it's going to pull it back as the time of the webinar in Eastern Standard Time. Okay, and here's the big reason. When you schedule your campaign pieces to go, they are going to be scheduled in Eastern Time in America. So if you're in Australia, for example, where you're 12 or 13 hours ahead, you need Infusionsoft to know that it needs to send those reminders like a day before the date that you put in. So if you, for example, are having a webinar on March 31st at noon, well, American Eastern Time, that's March 29th or March 30th at midnight, or whatever the time zone is. So Infusionsoft needs to know that it's actually March 29th that when the thing needs to be sent to remind them about the webinar that's happening that evening, right? Not on March 31st because they will have missed it at that point, okay? So that's just something to keep in mind. It's a little bit awkward. It's a little bit frustrating and annoying that that's the way that it works, but that is the way that it needs to work in order for the webinars, the reminders to go at the right time. Okay, so that's the second section, right? Sending the reminders through Infusionsoft just means pull back the webinar link and the title and the start date and time so you can send your emails out, okay? Now, the third section has the most options, and that is pulling back data after the webinar. Okay, so the first set of information we can track is who attended, right, which is apply the tag to those that attended and apply this tag to those that didn't. We can also pull back how many minutes they were there, when they came and when they left, and then any questions and comments that they may have given. Now, the tags applying to the attendees and the non-attendees, that's pretty straightforward. There's not a whole lot to explain there, I don't think. The number of minutes, this is all just information that we're pulling back. And then the scheduling of it can be a little bit confusing, because what Plus This does is it goes and looks at the webinar and finds when the end date and time of the webinar is supposed to be, and then automatically schedules it 90 minutes after that. So if your webinar is an hour long, it's going to be 2.5 hours after it starts, right? Because this is 90 minutes after it ends. It is going to go and query your GoToWebinar and then apply these tags. Now, something you have to know. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you run a webinar, you get all the way through to the end and you stop, and there were maybe 100 people registered and 50 of them showed up. Correct. So you know that 50 of them are going to get the attended tag and 50 of them are going to get the non-attended tag. Okay. If for whatever reason that webinar gets restarted, if it's by accident, if it's whatever happens, when plus this, if that happens before plus this goes and gets the attendee data, GoToWebinar is going to show a webinar where nobody showed up. Okay. In their records, that's what they show. Is the most recent edition of that webinar has 0 attendees. So it's going to go apply the non-attendee tag to everybody that registered for that webinar, if plus this goes after the webinar restarts again. So you have to be very careful when you're running your webinars that they don't get restarted on accident after the fact, or that you don't start a new edition of that before plus this goes and gets the attendee data. And so what I usually like to do is I'll just go in, I'll set it to go 90 minutes after or whatever, but I'll just go run the thing immediately after the webinar is completed, so that it always gets the attendee data right away, and it just sort of shortcuts that whole thing, so it doesn't actually go later and pull that data. Okay, so that's kind of something that's important to keep in mind, is that because of the way that GoToWebinar works and the way that plus this deals with GoToWebinar, it's not always going to be as straightforward as we'd like it to be. Okay. So that's pretty much all there is to know about this feature. I think I've given you a pretty intense, workings over of this particular thing. Remember, if you reschedule the webinar in GoToWebinar, make sure you remove this feature and then re-add it. And by the way, just so that you're aware, we have in the past and we continue to have issues with GoToWebinar developer support. And so if there are issues, the first recourse is to remove the feature and add it again, and see if that doesn't fix it. And then if not, then reach out to us, and we'll see if we can't get a hold of them and see if there's something going on. So just keep that in mind. The next feature that I want to talk about is the plus this video tracking for YouTube playlists. And you'll notice, first of all, that there's nothing different about this feature in terms of the setup than anything else, than any of the other ones, except that it only supports YouTube playlists. Okay. Now, one thing that I will point out, I'm going to actually go to YouTube here and grab a playlist. Just grab a random one. I don't know how. I'm going to see if I can find a random playlist. I don't know why I have Jennifer Lawrence here all over the place. Oh, you know what? I think I have some videos in here. If I go to this playlist, bear with me for a second here. Okay, share, embed. All right. So we have this playlist, and we're going to drop it in here and hit continue. Okay, so it's going to see the YouTube playlist. Now, one thing I want you to notice is that this description here is a little bit different than the description of the regular video tracking. Okay, because in the other video tracking, we're talking about a certain point in the video when the tag will be applied. And that always assumes the fact that they're going to watch to that point and then continue to watch after, because they could potentially skip to after that point in the video and then the tag wouldn't get applied because they didn't actually watch that particular timestamp in the video. Okay, so that's something about the old, like the regular, I shouldn't say the old, but the normal video tracking. With YouTube playlists, it's a little bit different, because we're not tracking at what point in all the videos are we going to apply this tag. We want to know after a certain number of seconds of watching something in this whole playlist. Okay. Obviously, the idea is once I've watched a minute of this, these 3 videos that are a minute long each, so it'd be like 2.5 minutes altogether. Then I know that I've watched the first video, the second video, and halfway through the third video. But it could be that somebody's just watched the first 30 seconds, 4 times or 5 times. Okay, this feature is really just about creating the way that this is set up is to say, okay, after somebody has been watching a video in this playlist for X number of seconds, then I want to apply this tag. Okay, so keep that in mind, and then once you put that in there and give it a name, it just gives you the same embed code that it did before. Okay. Same type of, I gotta pick a tag. Right, so this embed code comes out. Again, this is just YouTube, but you can put it in Customer Hub, iMember 360, or just on your website. And the same stuff applies, right? If you put it on your website, you need to make sure you pull out this code and stick it at the end of the video. Okay. Now, that's kind of the new video tracking feature, the way that thing is going to work. I want to flip over now and see if we've got any more questions or comments on anything that we've talked about. I don't know that we do, but I'm going to take a look here. Yeah, it does not look like we do have any more questions or comments. The other thing about these videos here, let me flip off my screen share and go back to. There we go. The other thing that I would like to make sure that we have happen on these videos and on the jam sessions in general is once we figure out how to make it more interactive, where you guys can actually jump in and we can chat back and forth. This really is your it's like the best way to come and get advice on how to use different features, use case scenarios, ways that people are using it. But there's so many options to choose from that short of just creating a big long list and going through them all, which is going to be hit or miss based on what you guys want to actually hear. It's going to be important that you guys come to the jam sessions and that you insert your comments. Now, I will say this. If you would like these video, I actually create the event a week in advance. In fact, once I'm done here, I'm going to create the event for next week. And I'm going to go and post it in our help.plusthis.com site. If you want to get questions on the docket for next week, the comment section will be open as soon as I get it embedded, as soon as I create the event. So you could actually go and type your questions in at any point, actually there, and that will show up here as questions that I can answer. And then also, if you have questions you want me to bring up on the jam session, bring them to help.plusthis.com, submit a ticket, and just say, hey, I want you to answer this on the jam session and show me some ways to do this, and I'll bring those as well as the comments here, and I can have that be part of what I do for this. So hopefully everybody got some stuff out of today. This is going to, again, be posted at help.plusthis.com, which is where you get all of your support. There's other videos there. We're doing some more training stuff that you should be seeing soon. And we will see you next week. So again, help.plusthis.com, submit tickets for questions next week. Go to the YouTube page, go to, on the site, go to the actual page for next week's webinar, and then go to YouTube, and you can actually put in your comments, which would be questions that I can answer for next week. You can also tweet them to me at @ReverendJames, or do that however you'd like to. So for now, that's all we've got. So I will see you all next week, and this is me signing off.